All right, ready for a deep dive today? We're looking at someone who, you might not know her name yet.
Oh, she's
She's
fascinating.
really changing what it means to be like a modern princess.
Yeah, and especially coming from where she does, it's really interesting how she mixes tradition with, like global change.
Exactly. Princess Ameerah Al-Taweel. She's way more than just, a princess title. We're going to look at her whole journey. Philanthropist, fighting for women and not afraid to kind of shake things up.
What I think is really interesting is she wasn't born into all that, palaces and all
I
that.
know, that's what's so cool. Like, she was born in Riyadh in '83, normal life, right?
Right.
But then picture this. She's 18, gets an interview for a school paper with Prince Awalid bin Talal, like one of the richest guys around. Talk
Uh,
about a life-changing moment.
you have to remember, though, Prince Awali was a lot older, 32 years older. So
Oh.
when they got married in 2008, people were surprised.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But they really shared this passion for giving back, for philanthropy.
And their work, the Awalid philanthropies, it was huge. Poverty, disaster relief, all sorts of things.
Yeah, they did a lot.
But was it really her passion, or was she, like, playing the role of the prince's wife?
Good question. I think what she did later shows us the answer. They divorced in 2013, totally amicable split, but instead of, stepping away, Ameerah actually got even more involved.
Really?
Yeah. She became vice chairperson of the whole organization, leading all their work around the world,
So that shows she really cared about the work itself.
for sure.
But did she just keep doing the same stuff, or does she have her own ideas?
Well, she really focused on this group, Celatec. It's all about empowering young people in the Arab world, helping them get jobs, build a future. And remember, she's got a business degree.
Right.
So this wasn't just about charity. She had a plan.
So she was thinking long term, how to really fix things, not just put a Band-Aid on them.
Exactly. And this is all happening in a place where, women often don't have the same chances. So her fighting for women's rights, especially in education and jobs, that became really important.
And she didn't just talk about it, right? I mean, she was at huge global events like the Clinton Global Initiative,
Hmm.
where presidents and CEOs and everyone gets together to solve big problems.
Oh, yeah, that's a big deal.
And coming from a more, let's say, traditional background, that's really interesting.
It is. She's pushing for change, but in a way that tries to connect cultures, not just, force Western ideas on everyone.
So she's kind of a model for how the world needs to be more understanding, more inclusive.
Yeah, I think so. It's
Then,
not just the work, it's her values. They come through in everything.
but I wonder, what do people in Saudi Arabia think? I mean, she's taking on this big role, pushing for some pretty progressive stuff.
Right.
Did she face any pushback? Did she have to compromise?
Now that's where things get really interesting. That's where we see how complex her story really is.
Okay, let's get into that. How did she handle all that, and what difference did she actually make?
Yeah, let's dive in.
All right, let's do it.
So, thinking about the reactions, inside Saudi Arabia,
Yeah.
it was interesting, right? Because on one hand, people were really happy. She was bringing attention to the region, bringing in money.
Right, and she was talking about things that maybe people weren't always comfortable discussing openly, like poverty and what it's like to be a woman there.
Exactly. But then, of course, there were some people who thought she was, too Western, too outspoken, maybe even like a threat to how things have always been done.
I was just thinking about that. Like her clothes, right? Sometimes traditional abaya, sometimes, a fancy gown at some big event. Was that on purpose or just her style?
I think it was both. She knew what it meant, showing you can be modern and still respect where you come from. And for some people there, that was powerful, maybe even a little scary.
It's like she was walking a tightrope, pushing, but also trying to bring people together.
Right.
Did she ever talk about that, like publicly?
She did, yeah. In interviews, she talked about, slow change, working within the system, not just trying to blow everything up. Evolution, not revolution, is how she put it.
That's smart.
Yeah. So not demanding everyone change overnight, but more like nudging things forward from the inside.
And I guess that, plus, really caring about the work, that probably helped with the people who were skeptical.
It did. She came across as genuine, wanting what's best for her people, not just pushing some Western agenda.
But still, fighting for women's rights in a place where, until recently, they couldn't even drive, that must have been tough.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There were times when events she'd planned got canceled or, religious leaders pushed back. It wasn't always easy.
Wow. So how did she handle that? Did it make her, like, back down, or did it make her even more determined?
I think it actually made her stronger. She knew change takes time, there'd be bumps along the way,
Mhm.
but she never gave up on what she believed.
This reminds me of her work with Silotech, that youth employment thing. Was that at all connected to her women's rights stuff, or are those separate?
No, they were connected. She understood that, for women to have power, to have a voice, they need to be able to support themselves. And in the Arab world, where so many young people can't find jobs, that's a huge problem for everyone, men and women.
So Silotech was about more than just jobs. It was about fixing a much bigger problem.
Exactly. And, having that business background probably helped her see how to do it the right way, make it last.
It makes you wonder, though, how much of their success was because of her. Was she really in charge or just lending her name, for publicity?
It's hard to say for sure, but people who worked with her there, they say she made a real difference. Very hands-on, involved in planning, helping young entrepreneurs.
That's cool. So she wasn't just writing checks. She wanted to be involved, make a real difference.
Right. And that's something I really admire about her. Not afraid to get her hands dirty, to see the real problems.
So we're seeing this picture emerge, right? Strategic, doesn't give up, willing to do the work herself.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out a bit. What about globally? Did her work actually change things beyond Saudi Arabia?
Well, she definitely became well-known internationally, especially after marrying Prince Al-Walid. But it was after the divorce that people really started to see her as a serious force for change.
How did that happen? Speeches? Working with other groups?
All of that, actually.
Yeah.
She used platforms like the Clinton Global Initiative to talk about the issues she cared about, partnered with groups working on the ground in different places.
Wait, what is the Clinton Global Initiative exactly? I've heard the name, but...
It's a big gathering started by Bill Clinton, the former U.S. president.
Right.
It brings together like world leaders, super rich philanthropists, CEOs, all making promises to solve big global problems.
Okay, got it. So she was hanging out with some pretty important people.
Yeah, she was.
But did she actually influence them, or was it more about getting herself noticed?
Probably a bit of both. She was smart about using those opportunities, to raise awareness and make connections.
Right.
But she also genuinely wanted to learn from other people, work together on solutions.
So not just talking at them, but having a real conversation.
Exactly. And that's something people don't always see. She was a great diplomat, able to handle all those tricky cultural and political situations.
So not just passionate, but also really smart, knew how to use her position to make things happen.
Yeah, and that's what makes her story so interesting. She doesn't fit in a box, princess, businesswoman, philanthropist, diplomat, all of those things.
It makes you wonder if there was one specific thing that really launched her onto that global stage, or was it more gradual?
Well, there was one event that really got a lot of attention, and that was, there was one event that really got a lot of attention, and that was her appearance on the Oprah Winfrey Show back in 2011.
Oprah! Wow, that's like a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
What did they talk about?
A lot of things, her childhood, her marriage, her work. But what really caught people's attention was when she talked about, what it's like to be a woman in Saudi Arabia, the struggles they face.
I bet that was eye-opening for a lot of people around the world, people who don't really know what it's like there.
Exactly, made it real, showed that behind all the news and stereotypes, there are real women fighting for basic things like education and freedom.
Did she give, like, specific examples?
She did. Talked about how hard it is for women to go to school, start businesses, even just move around freely.
And what was the reaction? Oprah, the audience, what did they think?
A mix of things. Surprise, admiration, and I think a lot of people finally understood. Oprah was great, asking the right questions, letting Ameerah tell her story in her own words.
So that was kind of a turning point, taking her message to a whole new level.
It was. After that, she was seen as a global leader for women's rights, not just in Saudi Arabia.
Did that change her, though? All that attention, did it make her more careful or more, bold?
It's interesting. It seemed to make her even more sure of herself, more committed. She used her platform to speak out against things she thought were wrong, even if it meant some people back home wouldn't like it.
So she wasn't afraid to make waves.
Not at all. She knew that real change means taking risks, sometimes making people uncomfortable.
That takes us back to something we talked about before. How did she balance, tradition and being modern? Did she ever really bring those two sides together?
That's the heart of her story, I think. She didn't see them as opposites, She believed you could be modern and still respect your roots.
So like a middle ground, something we need more of these days.
Exactly. She showed that you can have different ideas, even ones that seem to clash, and still find a way forward.
And that reminds me of what you said about Evolution, not revolution. Did that actually work? Did her work really change things in Saudi Arabia?
It's hard to measure, for sure, but she definitely played a part in the growing movement for women's rights there. And remember, this was all happening during a time of big changes in Saudi Arabia anyway.
Right, lots going on.
But did she ever point to specific things and say, look, this happened because of me? Not really.
Hmm, interesting.
She was humble, always giving credit to others, but there were definitely times when she was working behind the scenes, pushing for reforms, like making it easier for women to go to school or travel.
So smart about using her influence, not always needing to be the center of attention.
Exactly. She knew that real change takes time, patience, and sometimes quiet diplomacy.
That's a good lesson for all of us, I think. It's not always about being loud. Sometimes it's about the work you do when no one's watching.
Absolutely. It reminds us that real impact can happen in quiet ways through steady effort.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Princess Ameerah Al-Tawel's amazing life, what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away?
I think the biggest lesson is that change is possible, even in places where you wouldn't expect it. It takes courage, kindness, and a willingness to connect with people who are different from you.
And to everyone listening, what part of her story speaks to you? What inspires you to make a difference in your own life, in your community? Remember, like Ameerah believed, even small actions can have a big impact.